are in Mexico, I have a news for you. Guess what? We are going to die. Oh yes, indeed. What documents we need to have in place in order to be ready to pass away? We're gonna go to the classroom and we're gonna show you exactly what you have to do in order to be ready to pass away. I don't like this video, but it's necessary. Okay? Vámonos. Welcome to the classroom, and guess what? We are with a certified mortician in the States, in California, and around the whole state zone, the US, and in Mexico, and her name is Beatriz Vargas. Let me introduce you, and you will give us your license number.
From California is 8920. I graduated in 1999. And also I'm certified in the whole United States.
And we're gonna talk about all the documents, all the things that you have to have before you passed away. You have to be prepared for that. So the question number one is this. Put attention. Betty,
yes.
What documents a person has to have before he passed away? I mean, what documents you have to have in order to be ready and don't give problems to your wife, your son, your relatives, your neighbor, your friend?
First of all, Carlos, I would like to thank you for inviting me for this interview, which is very important for the American community and any person who was not born in Mexico. Anybody who crossed the border for just 1 second must have these documents in case they pass away in Mexico.
Even if they have a tourist visa, they have to have that.
Yes.
Because it can occur any accident or any...
Once you cross the border and you're in Mexico, you're ruled by the Mexican rules.
Okay, did you hear that? Even the tourist people. Continue, Betty. Sorry.
Okay. The document that you must have all the time on your possession when you're coming to Mexico for a visit, for a trip, for vacation, for business. You don't necessarily have to have the originals, but you can carry with you a copy of both sides of this document. The first document is the birth certificate. It can be a copy. The second one is the ID. The decedent doesn't have to be a current ID, but if it's the passport, it has to be signed by the person naming on the passport. The next documents that you have to have is the next of kin. It can be your son, your daughter, your parents, siblings over the age of 18, and brothers or sisters. For a cremation in Mexico, let me clarify that. Only those persons can obtain permission for cremation. If you want to be transported into the United States once you pass away, it can be your uncle, your cousin, as long as you prove on your birth certificate that you have some sort of a relationship of blood. And also the ID has to be valid. With the decedent doesn't have to be valid, but with the next of kin must be valid.
Excuse me to interrupt you.
Sure.
It's very important, guys, because we've been watching passports from foreign people that is very important to be signed. Sometimes, a lot of times, we receive the passport without signature. And just for you to know, a passport without signature is not a valid passport. So it's very, very, very important. Mm-hmm. Okay.
The most important part in this is if you are married. A lot of people that pass away here in Mexico, they assume just because they have the marriage certificate, they can claim the remains of the decedent. But if that document is not apostille, it's not valid in Mexico. In the birth certificates, they don't require that. Most of the states don't require that. Ensenada is one of them. But the marriage certificate must be apostille.
Yeah, if you don't know what's an apostille is a certification that the country from the document is originally, they're certified that that document is real and authentic to be used in another country. And who issued that apostille? The Secretary of State of each country. So you have to have that in order to use that document in Mexico, right?
Right. Also, the apostle, a lot of people think that if you were married in New York, you can apostle in LA. No, you have to do the apostle in the city where you got married, or the state, the closest apostolic center. You have to do that in that place.
But I have a question, Betty.
Sure.
Okay, all the people who lives in Mexico, legal residents, okay, they will be able to have their birth certificates, their ID, and everything. But what if a tourist just come to Mexico and they have, unfortunately, an accident, or they got they passed away? What they have to do, their relatives, in order to do the process, smooth with the body, with a dead person.
You're talking about claiming the remains?
Claiming the remain.
Accident basically is the same. It's the same.
But what if the person came to Tijuana, or came to, imagine the guy comes to Tijuana and then he has an accident, but he didn't have the birth certificate with him. He just had his passport and the tourist visa.
Okay, something that I can do, a relative who lives close to their house in the States can go to their house, they can email it, scan it first, not a photocopy, scan the birth certificate or the ID, and we can print it up in here. But it has to be scanned first.
Okay.
See here, most of the time, it depends the city, the state that you have the death, that they have a special or different, a little bit of different requirements. But in here, we're talking about in Baja, especially the hardest place to die, I'm sorry, the expression, is Ensenada. And why? Because in here, like for instance in TJ, they don't request the apostille of the marriage certificate, but in Ensenada they do. They do. If you don't have that, you're gonna be in troubles. But there's, like Carlos said, there's a lot of steps, a lot of movements that you can do to make this process easy. But in this part that he's giving you here is so valuable, especially for the marriage people. One thing that I would like to clarify is the fact that you have to be sure that in your marriage certificate, your name, your wife and husband's name is the same as the birth certificate.
Oh, that's very important.
Every spelling, every punctuation is very important. If it's not like that, you will need to make an amendment. If you like to come to Mexico and have margaritas, be sure that you do the amendment and the checkup.
Imagine to make the amendment that it takes a couple of months in order to do this procedure. But there's another ways that we're gonna talk about that.
Exactly.
That is very important for Mexico. Let's say on the birth certificate it says Elizabeth with an H, and on the marriage certificate without with the H or without the H, that's a different. Mexico consider that as a different person.
Or something very important, like people who has a second name, like let's say Mary Jones, and it says Mary J. Smith. That doesn't say Mary Jones Smith. Then you will have a problem here. Has to be, the name has to be exactly. And believe me, I'm a mortician from California since 1999. When I came here to Mexico, and I own a funeral home here in Mexico, so I learned a lot of information that you guys must know and must be aware that if you love Mexico, love yourself. Because once you pass away, you leave a lot of problems to your family. And it's very sad that besides dealing with the fact that you lost your loved one, that you have to deal with the bureaucracy of Mexico. It's very sad. Been there, seen that, and believe me, listen to Carlos. He's giving you a valuable information. And I'm here, so 8920. You can verify my license number and the Cemetery and Funeral Board in California. That's where I'm licensed. That's where my practice is active. So any questions, feel free to call Carlos. And thank you, Carlos, for the invitation.
Thanks to you. We're gonna go to the next chapter to talk about the details and the steps, what to do if somebody passed away.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's go to the next chapter.